Well, hello, everyone. Happy Friday. We have made it through another week. We are here. We're ready to go. There is about a foot of snow outside my door. I don't know how you guys are doing. We were not expecting it to snow. Victor and I apparently don't know how to read a weather report. And so I was awoken this morning by a scream as Victor looked out the door and he said, "No!" And I was like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "It snowed." And snow it did. But it was a good thing that Victor had actually already bought me a couple of beers to replenish my beer that he drank the other day. So we're ready to go for happy hour. I will tell you about these beers in a bit. But Patrice reminds everyone to please mount the like button on the way in. If you've never been to one of our happy hours before, happy hour is a time where we take a little bit out of our day on a Friday afternoon. I drink some beer usually. You might have a cocktail. You might have something, stronger, depending on your sensibilities. And then we watch a woke training or presentation of some sort, and we comment on it, and we mock it, and we, most importantly, learn what our enemy is teaching and what our enemy is thinking so that we can effectively fight back against them. Now, today, we've been doing the race stuff a lot lately. And of course, with critical race theory being in the news all the time, that makes a ton of sense. We would focus on critical race theory, but I just thought we'd take a break. I thought we'd switch things up. And today we are going to be watching a presentation called Trans Rights Priorities for the Biden Administration. This was actually something that was voted on by my locals members. There's Sage Publishing, side note, apparently does a whole bunch of woke training. Oh, well, this is nice. Patrice says, yeah, the stream was a bit hard for me to find too. YouTube not promoting it on my pages. Gotta love YouTube. Gotta love YouTube. So apparently Sage Publishing has a whole bunch of woke trainings, and I actually had my locals vote on a couple of different options. And this is the one they wanted to watch, which is Trans Rights Priorities for the Biden Administration. Now, this was filmed almost a year ago, about 11 months ago. And so we're going to be able to see what of their predictions have come to pass and what is still maybe on the agenda. The description is a new presidential administration that is supportive of trans rights provides opportunities to make further progress on addressing discrimination and violence against trans people. This event looks at how trans leaders are hoping to make gains during the Biden administration. This event is being held to mark the publication of the Sage Encyclopedia of Trans Studies, edited by Abby Goldberg and Jenny Beeman. These panelists are all contributors to that work. And then it says this is sponsored by the University of Massachusetts Stonewall Center, Clark University's Women's and Gender Studies program, co-sponsored by Umass Women, Gender, Sexuality Studies, and the 5 College Queer, Trans, and Sexuality Certificate Studies. So lots of higher ed stuff going on there. Now, I do want to say before we get started with the presentation, I do want to say this. I have no problem with trans people. I don't. I think that everyone should be able to live their own best life. I don't care how you dress. I don't care what your pronouns are. I don't care how you wear your hair. I don't care what your gender identity is, whether you are a trans man, a trans woman, non-binary, any of 87 billion gender identities. I don't really care. I hope that you are happy and I hope you live your best life. Where I do start to have a little bit of a problem is not with like your run of the mill trans person that is really just trying to live their lives in a way that makes them feel comfortable. And I will totally be respectful of trans people who are trying to do that. I'll use your pronouns as long as I think that you're not trying to exert power over me. And it has never actually been the case for me where I've refused to use someone's pronouns. It's never happened. Now I might flub it up if you're doing the they them thing, because quite frankly, there are issues around grammar with that I haven't quite gotten used to yet, but I'll try. Like, I think that everyone deserves basic respect and courtesy. And I think if you extend basic respect and courtesy to me, I'm always going to extend basic respect and courtesy to you. However, What we're talking about here is not like normal trans people. What we're talking about here is trans activism. And to be quite frank, I think that trans activists give normal trans people just a really bad name, and I think that they make life harder for them. So I want to just really clearly draw that distinction at the front. Sin says I had to resubscribe and then set it to all again. Oh, that's great. So, guys, if you aren't receiving notifications on the channel, go ahead, double check, make sure you're subscribed. Maybe you even want to unsubscribe and I've actually heard from a lot of people. They do this on my main channel too. People tell me that they will purposefully unsubscribe and resubscribe and then turn on all notifications again. And then YouTube actually starts serving them my content again. So that might be something you want to try. But definitely make sure you're subscribed. Definitely make sure you mount that like button for me. Now, we do have the option of Unwoke Bingo today if you want to. I will say that Unwoke Bingo is primarily written for race presentations, primarily written for critical race theory. So you might not have as much luck today, but who knows? It says it doesn't cost anything to join. You can download your bingo card if you want to, click Generate Card, and you're going to get a free space in the middle. And then we're doing a line or we're doing corners. You might get really lucky today with it. Who knows? Once we get that, we just yell out bingo in the chat. You will get a round of applause and congratulations. And you won't win anything beyond that. But then we move on to blackout bingo. And it might be the day. Who knows? I have been fooled before by presentations that I didn't think were going to be good for bingo. And they turned out to be really great for bingo. So I could be completely wrong about this. But most importantly, guys, if you want to support the work I'm doing, I stream 6 days a week. I stream on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on my main channel at 5 p.m. I will always have new content on my main channel if you're looking for that and you haven't seen it in a while. And then, of course, on Fridays, we come over to my second channel, Actively Unwoke, for happy hour. And we do our streaming here instead. On Saturdays, I rest. I take the day off. Tomorrow, I'm going to a politics committee meeting for the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, and then we are going to a charity hockey game. And you know what's fun about the hockey game is in New Hampshire, it's not actually Democrats versus Republicans, it's Republicans versus Libertarians. That's how big of a foothold Libertarians have in New Hampshire. We get our own charity hockey game, and I'm going to be going to that tomorrow. I don't know anything about hockey, but I imagine that we're going to hang out, have a good time, and I'm going to take my Saturday off. Anyway, if you appreciate all the work I'm doing in terms of trying to stream this stuff, to teach you about it, to expose you to new content, to share with a different perspective of the world, I hope you'll consider supporting my work. You can do so over at kb.locals.com/support. I cannot do the work I'm doing without the support of my locals. And I do try to give lots of exclusives and perks and, quite frankly, a really different side of me in locals than even you guys see on YouTube. We do 2 community Zoom calls every single week. We do a book club. We do a craft and bitch. We're launching an Unwoke Army on Sunday. It's going to be pretty rad. You get access to all of that and much, much more. And, most importantly, the best community on all of locals, so far as I'm concerned. And you get that for the price of $5 a month. You can also do $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. You can also make a one-time gift. And all of these things help keep me in business. They help keep me streaming. They make it possible for me to have time to research all of this stuff. And I greatly, greatly appreciate it. I also did just want to give you guys a heads up. So normally on Sundays on my main channel, we do effed up news of the week. Now we're going to have to postpone effed up news this week because we're going to do effed up news on Monday. Don't worry, effed up news isn't going anywhere. But on Sunday on my main channel, I have a very special stream. For the first time ever, my husband, Victor, will be joining me on a stream. Victor agreed to this while he was drunk last night. I don't know if he is having any regrets or not, but he agreed to it, and I already made the promo. So on Sunday, we will be joined by my Ukrainian husband, and he is going to give us his perspective about what is going on in Ukraine and Russia. Victor is 100% Ukrainian. He left when he was 21. He lived in England for a while. He lived in Ireland for a while. And then he came to the United States. And then at some point, many, many years after he came to the United States, he was lucky enough to meet me. And we have been married ever since. And so he is going to give his perspective on it. Now, Victor's entire family still lives in Ukraine. And in fact, Victor's brother is extremely excited about getting his gun and going to fight the Russians. And so Victor is very proud of what the people of Ukraine are doing in terms of standing up against Russia. He really is. I can't even tell you guys. I have never seen Victor this excited about anything in the I have never seen well, I should qualify that. I've never seen Victor this excited about anything Ukraine related in the entire time that we've been together, and that will be 11 years in May. So he is going to come and talk to us about his perspective, and he's going to answer your questions. And I think it's going to be a really great stream. And we are going to be doing that at 5 p.m. on Sunday on my main channel. Julie says, wait, he was drunk when he agreed? Hope he doesn't change his mind. I don't think he will. I told him, I checked with him again this morning, and I said, you were drunk last night and you agreed to do a stream. And he said, yeah, I'll still do it. Victor doesn't like being on camera. He doesn't like it at all. So he is taking a little bit of like a leap of he's putting himself out there for all of us. But he did a great AMA on Twitter last night, and I really think you guys are going to appreciate what he has to say about it. So you can tune in on 5 p.m. on Sunday for that, and then we'll do effed up news on Monday. It'll just be a day later. The news will still be as effed up on Monday as it was on Sunday, so no big deal there. All right, we've done our promos, we've done our shilling. Let's open a beer, shall we? Now, I only have 2 beers here today, but that's okay because I usually only drink 2 beers. The first beer we're going to drink is called Slurpee, and it is from Pipe Dream Brewing in Londonderry, New Hampshire, and it is a slushy sour ale. And it says, this unique sour ale was inspired by our favorite flavorful, slushy drinks infused with the jolliest of watermelon hard candies. So that's going to be our first beer. And then once we're done that, the next one we're going to drink, this is an Imperial. I'm actually really excited about this one. It is a cherry pie sour, which is an Imperial fruited pastry beer. And this beer is 7.5% alcohol. So it's a little bit stronger than the first one, but the can is so pretty too. Like Victor's got a good can game when he buys beer for me. But let's pour our Slurpee beer. I bet it's going to be pretty. I bet it's going to be pink. Fun fact, I hated the color pink growing up. Hated it, hated it, hated it, hated it, hated it. I still don't like light pastel pink today, but other pinks have grown on me. Oh god, I can smell the sugar from here. I just got like a waft of sugar in the nose. Alexandra says the herb I'm about to be smoking is cherry pie. Ah, excellent, Alexandra! Excellent! That's so pretty. See, I like that color pink. Oh god, this is like the most watermelon-y smelling beer. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, this is deadly right here. This is deadly. This tastes like a candy, but it's a beer. Oh my gosh. This beer would be perfect. This is like one of those hot day beers where you're like sitting out on the deck or you're at the beach or something and you just want something that doesn't taste like alcohol at all, but in fact has alcohol in it. Yeah, you know what this reminds me of? Sin says she's making a red wine spritzer. This reminds me of like, this is horrible. But this is how most people first start drinking, right? This reminds me of a wine cooler. Who used to get drunk on wine coolers? You know you did. You know you did. This reminds me of a wine cooler is what this reminds me of. Mmm. Delicious. All right, good choice for Victor. Who is ready to start our presentation on trans rights priorities? Make sure you mounted that like button, guys. Let me know in the chat if you're ready to get started. Chrome tab, trans rights priorities. And I just want to check in over on Odyssey. I want to check in over on Rockfin. I even want to check in over on Rumble. I do stream on all the different platforms. All right. Looks like Patrice says, I've never had a wine cooler. I like, yeah, I think kind of the same thing as Smirnoff Raspberry. Kind of the same thing. All right, guys, I think we're ready to go. Let's get this party started.
Okay, I think we can get started. Okay, so welcome everybody. My name is Abby Goldberg and I'm...
Okay, first question, and this is awful. I know this is awful. Is this a man or a woman? I don't know. Trans woman? I'm going to guess this is a trans man. I don't know. I have no other ideas.
I'm a professor of psychology at Clark University, and I want to welcome you here today to this very special event, which is being held to mark the publication of the SAGE Encyclopedia of Trans Studies, which is edited by myself and Jenny Beeman at Umass Amherst, who will be today's moderator. So the encyclopedia contains about 300 articles on a range of topics that affect or intersect with trans lives and experiences, such as the criminal justice system, trans people in sports, Stonewall riots, trans people in mental health, the trans pride flag. And this encyclopedia is really the first of its kind. And I think its publication, particularly in the time of COVID, is a pretty momentous event. And it really does mark a turning point for trans visibility and liberation, as well as pointing us to all of the work that has left to be.
If your own liberation depends on the publication of a book, then I think you have a problem.
Done. So all of you today are going to receive an email following today's event with the links to entries written by today's panelists, as well as a flyer to send to your university or institution to their library. And that flyer will contain a discount code as well. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jenny, who is going to introduce our fabulous speakers.
Thanks, Abby. I'm Jenny Beeman, the director of the Stonewall Center at Umass Amherst. The format for today...
Jenny. Woman. Got it. Okay. She, her.
...is I will introduce the panelists, and each panelist will have 2 questions to respond to, speaking for 5 minutes to each question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. Please post your questions using the Q&A function. We're so fortunate to have an amazing group of speakers for this event. Starting out, we have Kyler Broadus, the cool Kyler Broadus. Kyler is a pioneer in the trans movement as an attorney, activist, public speaker, author, and professor. He is founder and director of the Trans People of Color Coalition, the only national organization dedicated to the civil rights of trans people of color.
Wait. He's head of the Trans Persons of Color Association? Okay, okay.
Board of the National Black Justice Coalition, where he was board chair for 3 years and currently serves on the Freedom for All of America board.
He's also, well, I'm gonna fuck up pronouns today. I apologize in advance if I fuck up pronouns. I'm truly not trying to be disrespectful. I'm really not. He's on the board of the black, okay, never mind. Let's keep going.
He's served on numerous other boards and committees and helped craft legislation at the local, state, and federal level. He was the first out trans person to testify before the Senate. Next, we have the super Sasha Booker. Sasha is a senior attorney in the Washington, D.C. office of Lambda Legal, the oldest and largest organization dedicated to advancing civil rights.
This is going to be very confusing.
People. During her time at Lambda Legal, she has been involved in extensive federal and state legislative and policy efforts on a wide range of issues, including judicial nominations, criminal justice, policy reform, and healthcare initiatives. She is also litigating a number of cases expanding and solidifying federal civil rights protections for LGBTQ people. Before joining Lambda Legal, Sasha served as a staff attorney and policy counsel at the Transgender Law Center. She was the first openly trans person to be appointed to a state board in Oregon. We also have the keen Chris Hayashi with us. Chris has over 20 years of movement building experience. He has been the executive director at the Transgender Law Center, one of the largest organizations in the country advancing the rights of trans people since 2015. Prior to that, he was TLC's deputy director. Chris also has led two other organizations as executive director. He was executive director at Youth United for
It
Community
is rather
Action
rude
in
of her to eat
California,
on this webinar,
which is a
isn't it?
grassroots community organization
I find
for
that to
young
be rather
people of
rude.
color to empower themselves and work for environmental and social justice. Subsequently, Chris was the executive director of the Audre Lorde Project for 10 years. ALP is an LGBTQ plus group for people of color for community organizing, mainly in New York City.
Oh.
We're also pleased to have here the marvelous Mara Kiesling. Mara founded and has been the executive director of the National Center for Transgender Equality, the nation's leading political advocacy organization for trans people since 2003. She has led organizational and coalitional efforts that have won significant advances in trans equality, including the inclusion of gender identity in the Federal Employment Non-Discrimination Act from 2007 onward, and countless other federal and state legal wins. She's currently a leader in the effort to pass the Equality Act, which I'm sure she will talk about today. Mara also co-authored Injustice at Every Turn, the groundbreaking 2009 report of the National Transgender Discrimination Survey, and the report of the 2015 US Transgender Survey. Prior to founding NCTE, Mara worked for 25 years in social marketing and opinion research. And finally, no panel on trans rights would be complete without the stupendous Shannon Price Minter. Shannon is a longtime legal advocate for trans people. For the past 20 years, he has served as legal director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, one of the nation's leading legal advocacy organizations for LGBTQ people. He has represented trans youth, elders, asylum seekers, employees, spouses, parents, athletes, students, conversion therapy survivors, and customers in civil rights cases across the country. That's a lot. He is the author of Family Law for LGBTQ People and an editor of Transgender Rights. He has also received numerous awards for his advocacy for LGBTQ people, including the Dan Bradley Award for the National LGBTQ Bar Association.
Their introductions are always like the longest. They always take like 15 minutes.
Welcome, everyone.
I could use a boba tea. I love boba tea. It's the best.
To you all.
Yes, congratulations on all your accolades.
For you all is this. Please discuss what your organization is working on now to advance trans rights under the Biden administration. And anyone can start, so who's willing to go first?
No one wants to talk.
Just jump on in.
I'm happy to start.
Thank you, Sasha.
Sure. Yeah, and thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. I don't know what I'm doing on this panel. Everyone except me is a legend in this movement. So I especially want to, hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, but I just want to honor Mara, especially, who founded NCTE and has done so much great work for our community. When I was a little trans baby, she came to Portland and you really inspired me and showed me, the direction that this movement could go in. So just really appreciate everything you've done, Mara. And in answering your question, Jenny, Lambert Legal's been working on, advancing trans rights and non-binary rights for, a while, even before the Biden administration. We'll continue to do that outside of the presidential administration, but specifically, what we plan to be doing and we're working on now is to continue to, repair the damage that's been done over the last 4 years. It's been
repair the damage. What damage?
On this call, I'm
I
sure
want
knows,
receipts.
And there's
What
a number
damage?
of lawsuits that are still outstanding.
What
I
damage?
think we filed 8 of them just against the Health and Human Services Agency alone. With regard to trans rights, for example, there's a challenge that's still happening, challenging the Trump administration's action to try to eliminate protections for trans people in the middle of the pandemic and under the Affordable Care Act, non-discrimination protections. And so we're, litigating that, but we're also working on the policy end to, hopefully, build something much stronger. So it's about repairing the damage that's been done over the last 4 years, but to also
think, proactively, obviously, because we want to come back, address issues that, we weren't able to address during the Obama administration, for example. Data collection, we've got some really solid data collection, but there's a whole lot more that needs to be done on that front. So there'll be a lot of work on that end as well. Other issues, that are still outstanding are, for example, trans veterans still aren't able to access transition-related healthcare treatments for surgical care. And that's something we've litigated about in the past, but that's been put on hold. And we're confident that the Biden-Harris administration will, do the right thing and move forward with positive policy making in the next 3 years. They've already, indicated that that's the direction they're going to go in. So we're hopeful that we won't have to litigate anymore with the administration. So hopefully some of those things happen quickly. Other pieces of work that we're working on, I don't want to go too deep into the weeds, but there was a great Supreme Court decision last June, the Bostock decision, clarifying that what we've been arguing for, over 20 years, that sex discrimination protections in federal law encompass protections for trans folks. And that, court after court has agreed with us on that issue, except for the Trump administration, obviously. But the Supreme Court,
the Trump administration did not do anything to prevent discriminate against trans people in the workplace, to the best of my knowledge. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't so. Okay, my understanding is that the biggest thing that the Trump administration did was prevent trans people from serving in the military. And that was more of a mental health issue than it was really a trans issue, because I think we do have to acknowledge that there are mental health considerations when it comes to being trans. And I'm not using that as any sort of insult or anything like that. Like I said at the very beginning, and I do genuinely mean this, I want trans people to live however they want to live, and I want them to live their best life, and I want them to be happy, and I will use the pronouns, and I will respect them as human beings and all of those things. However, there are mental health considerations at play. There simply are. And when you're talking about sending people into military conflicts as people who are on active duty, you need to take that into consideration. I'm not 1,000% sold, to be quite frank, on the Trump administration's decision on that. I don't think it should necessarily be a blanket ban. I think there should be more nuance to that, but I also understand why they did it. But am I wrong in saying that that was really the biggest thing that the Trump administration did around the military? It's not like the Trump administration barred trans people from working. It's not as though the Trump administration supported laws that would have been discriminatory towards trans people. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat.
Had a really great decision. And so there's been a lot of thinking and a lot of work to make sure that that's becomes a reality for people. That there's one thing. It's one thing to have.
And by the way, and I think we also need to be careful, because I know this is a loaded topic, but I want to be careful to provide a pretty balanced perspective here, in that I don't think that organizations should be firing people for being trans. I don't think that's a good enough reason to fire someone. Now, if it impacts their work product, that is a different story. But I do not believe that people should lose their job because they're trans.
Well, that's another thing, to have the actual lived reality. So it's really important that, we continue to advocate, both through litigation out in the world, challenging, discriminatory policies like the athlete bans that we're starting to see, move forward.
It's not an athlete ban.
This important decision clarifying that sex discrimination includes trans people, but also important to work with the Biden administration specifically to make sure that the different agencies implement federal law consistent with not just the Bostock decision, but all of the lower court decisions, that have similarly held that, trans folks are protected. Another issue area, and I won't go on because I know we're, there's a whole lot we could talk about, but one really important issue that needs a lot more work is that we need to repair the courts. The courts, as you mentioned in the intro, I work on this, and I've worked on it for the last 3.5 years, and it's really horrifying to see, because of some wonky things like the blue slip, which I won't get into, but there's been ways.
Did she just say that their job is to repair the courts? to repair. It is, I'm sorry, trans activists, it is not your job at all in any way to repair the courts. Incognito said, Trump's grandfather all trans soldiers. Trump grandfathered all trans soldiers. I support ban on trans soldiers openly serving because of cultural interactions in world like with Islam. I can understand that. I can also understand that there would probably be ways that they could make sure that, you know, trans people wouldn't be put in those positions. Like, there are things you can do to mitigate that.
That the Trump administration has abused process to pack the courts with really far-right, ultra-conservative judges.
The Trump administration did not abuse the process. Trump used his power as president to do his job. Just because you didn't like the nominees that he picked does not mean that he abused his power by doing his job. Now, I'm going to say this. Biden's Supreme Court nominee came out today. I actually don't think she looks that bad. She's actually kind of libertarian on some issues. If you don't believe me, go watch the video that Judge Napolitano posted on it. So Biden has the right to nominate a Supreme Court justice. Is Biden abusing his power because people on the right are not going to like the person that he nominated, no matter what qualifications or experience or position she holds? No. He's not abusing his power. He's doing his job. Elections have consequences. He gets to pick.
Judges, and it's just really important that a lot of work is done to make sure that the Biden administration, you know, brings forward judges that are demographically and professionally diverse and are able to.
By the way, the trans people are not going to like this judge.
Forget that. Yeah, these are lifetime appointments. These people are going to be, you know, making decisions, you know, for 30 plus years in a lot of cases, and so it's just really important that that they move quickly. And so we're working with the coalition here to make sure that there's great names being, you know, put forward and that they're moving quickly. There's over 100 vacancies now, you know, throughout the judicial system, the federal judicial system. So, you know, we're hopeful that that'll be something that will move quickly. There's a lot of work being done with the Bureau of Prisons. You know, there's, you know, trans folks and non-binary folks and criminal justice and prisons and jails experience horrific conditions in a wide range of issue areas. So there's a lot of work being done, you know, to with the Biden administration to make sure that trans folks in federal prison systems are safe. As well.
So Spirit Matter is asking, why won't they like this judge? So the GOP did not do their homework on this judge. This judge is on the board of a school that flat out says that there are two genders. So the trans activists are not actually going to like this judge. But of course, the GOP, being they don't do their homework at all for anything, didn't know that when they already came out against this judge. So.
As well as the Department of Homeland Security. So those are some of the things that we're working on, you know, directly with the Biden administration, and happy to dig deeper and talk further about any of those issues. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. I go next. Is that all right? So, Sasha, thank you. And you actually are a legend. Unless you're referring to age, then the rest of us are legends, and you're not. So Sasha, thank you for that. Sasha covered a lot of the things that NCT is working on as well. You know, we do have a very clear, what's unfortunately called a blueprint for what we're going to do. And it covers all of the, well, you can't really see it on my iPad, but covers all the different areas that Sasha was talking about and some others that she didn't really have time to get into. Very importantly, we're also dealing a lot with presidential appointments. There were only about a dozen during the Obama administration, which was a pretty successful administration for trans people. This time we're going to lean a little harder on them. Right now, we've only had one appointment, and that's worrying us a little, and we're having conversations, but they're a little bit behind in a lot of areas. But what we do have
in
so
a lot of
the
areas,
first trans person ever confirmed in a position. That's Dr. Rachel Levine to be the Assistant Secretary of Health. And by the way, the Assistant Secretary of Health
wait. Are they specifically saying that they're lobbying for trans, like not just people who support trans people, but like they're lobbying for like specific trans appointees? because that's putting quite a litmus test on something, in my opinion.
Really the top policy person at Health and Human Services. This is a significant place to have a trans person sitting at the table. And Dr. Levine is a super big hero of mine, and I think she'll kick ass. We also need to see trans people in roles we haven't seen them before. Federal judges. There are a few trans people who are pushing up the ladder to try to get federal judgeships, and the same with ambassadors from the United States. As far as we all know, there's never been a trans ambassador from any country to any other country, an openly out trans ambassador. So we're working on.
Why does there need to be a trans ambassador? What, like, why would a qualification? And again, I don't have any problem with trans people. If a trans person is the most qualified person for the role of ambassador or cabinet secretary or whatever the hell, fine, I don't really care. But why are these people putting it has to be a trans person ahead of every other qualification? I don't mind if trans people are the most qualified people or even among the highest elite group of qualified people, and then you kind of pick one out of a hat. But if the first qualification that you're putting on the table is it has to be a trans person, that to me seems that to me seems like you know, a diversity hire at best. No, Ian, it's not the same thing as the new judge. You guys are going to get in trouble if you go after this judge and you say she's an unqualified person that was only picked because she's a black woman. That's not the same thing. The judge that Biden selected is probably, to be quite frank, the judge that Biden selected is probably like the best case scenario that could have possibly been asked for of a judge that Biden would appoint. You guys need to look into her. This isn't a joke. Like, I am actually really afraid that Republicans are going to make themselves look incredibly racist by going after this highly qualified judge that, quite frankly, is not that bad. Like, Biden could have picked many worse people than her. Okay, she's well, no. I wouldn't take this argument. You're going to look racist. I'm giving you guys some good advice right now. Don't, like, you have one challenge. Don't look like racists. She's going to get confirmed. Take the L. Biden is president. Elections have consequences. If the conservatives cared about getting more Supreme Court picks, then the conservatives should have fought harder for election integrity before the election, which is when it was the time to have that battle. It's not the same thing. She is a good candidate. You guys are going to look silly arguing against her. You really are. Or, like, silly is probably, like, best case scenario. Worst case scenario is racist. Like, legitimately racist.
People into the administration, and even there were during the Biden administration. Our agenda covers a whole lot within the administration in all of the areas that Sasha talked about. But one thing I want to talk about that I think is the most important thing we're going to be pushing them to do, and that is to finally create a real and broad plan for addressing the violence against
what violence?
Black trans women in particular, but trans women of color in general. About 3 years ago, Attorney General Jeff Sessions actually called us up and said, we want to come in and talk to us about how we can help solve this problem. And we thought that was a little far-fetched, but it essentially came down to he thought maybe he should prosecute some more people. And that's not going to help. It's not going to help enough. What we have to do is a whole big government push around ending the stigmatization, the marginalization, and the criminalization that's causing the violence. It's a really complex thing. The first thing they're going to have to do is sit down with the people who are.
So you want to create, what this person is talking about is literally creating like a government re-education program to try to change culture. Is that what we're talking about? Because it seems as though Jeff Sessions, and I don't like Jeff Sessions at all in any way, but it seems as though Jeff Sessions was actually like maybe being reasonable and reached out and said, I'll prosecute some more people. And instead of taking that as a win, these people said, no, that's not good enough. We need a whole cultural re-education program and a major push by the government, which, by the way, is not actually the job of the Attorney General. So that's the wrong person to have that conversation with in the first place. But let's keep going.
Most effective. This can't be something that NCT or MARA is pushing alone. This has to be them talking to actual people who participate, but then it's a big,
I mean,
big
how do you want the
menu
government to
of
enforce that?
policies that have to happen. Yeah, there
Like, how exactly do you propose that the government enforce acceptance of trans people? Are you implying that they should arrest people who don't want to use your pronouns? Are you implying that they should imprison people who don't break any laws but who say things that you don't like? Because that's kind of like, it sounds like what she's talking about here. Because Jeff Sessions apparently offered to prosecute more people who are committing crimes, which I think is a good thing. We should be prosecuting people who commit crimes. But it sounds like that's just not good enough, and they want mandated government cultural indoctrination. And how exactly do you expect to enforce that?
has to be some criminal justice reform. There definitely has to be some jails and prison reform and decreasing incarceration. But there also has to be things at the Department of Labor around job training, around economic opportunity. There's a lot in the Department of Health and Human Services that has to happen to make people feel that they can get jobs, and it just is across the whole government, and it has
It's not
to
the
be
government's responsibility to make you feel like you can get a job.
That we're going to be pushing soon for the Biden administration to really, really get down to. They're off to a really, really good start. No administration is ever going to be fast enough for all of us. That's really true. But this administration's off to a really good start, starting with day one. There's only a certain amount of things that a president can do on day one. And one thing President Biden did was issue an executive order that essentially said, hey, all of the places where there's sex discrimination laws, that should cover LGBT people, including trans and non-binary people. Let's make that happen. That has already shown up in a bunch of departments. We're going to see that more and more over the course of this year and next year and the following 2 years. This is the long game. This is a strategic game. But boy, did he get out of the blocks fast. Is that a sports term? I just used a sports term. That's fantastic. I'm not really particularly minded, but that's an important thing. And then I also just want to add our congressional agenda, our collective congressional agenda is pretty broad as well. Yeah, it includes the Equality Act, which would be such an important thing for all trans people. For instance, it includes in it non-discrimination protections in federal spending and federal programs. That's a remarkable tool that if we can win that, we will be able to get a lot more stuff across the government, from jails and prisons to lots of other things where the federal government has programming and discrimination won't be allowed. We have other things in Congress.
I don't have any.
Too,
actually, have a problem with that. Just so you guys know.
The,
well, let me qualify that.
Act.
I don't have a problem with that in general. I don't have a problem with like there being rules about not discriminating against trans people if we have rules about not discriminating against other classes as well. The question I have is, how are they applying that? Because if they are perceiving discrimination as being putting a trans woman, anyone who identifies as a trans woman in women's prisons, I have a problem with that. If they're talking about trans women being in women's sports, which will collectively destroy women's sports, I have a problem with that. So I guess like my issue has to do with the implementation of it and what they actually mean by it. But in general, I'm not actually opposed to there being laws against discriminating against trans people if there are laws that protect people based on other classes as well, to include race, which by the way does include white people too.
To just take the word gender out of it. That would allow us to start advocating.
Oh, yay, Grandma Nay. Awesome.
State governments to take sex and gender markers off of driver's licenses. Right now, they're required by federal law. They shouldn't be.
Nat D says Caitlyn Jenner would disagree with them. Yeah, I mean, there are many trans people who would disagree with them. I mean, they act like all trans people agree with them. That's not true in any way.
And I know that's a slightly controversial thing and a very controversial thing for some folks among us. But the truth is, in my opinion, the damage done by having sex and gender markers on driver's licenses is a lot
They
more
want to take
significant than the
they want to take all gender markers off of everything. Why? Like, okay, if they're talking about taking gender markers off of everything, then what are you transitioning to? That doesn't make any sense.
advantages we gain by allowing it to be fixed in the ways we want it to be fixed.
Where's
So
the
that's
data
a
on the
long-term
damage?
project, but there's a legislative thing. There's also lots of legislative work around the TSA and doing national security with some dignity and with some rationality. So it's just not annoying, invasive, and dangerous theater. I'm going to pull over and stop there and hand it off to whomever is next.
Thanks, Mara. I think that's me.
Oh,
Hey, everybody.
trans man.
This is great. I really enjoyed hearing Sasha.
They're all
Mara,
trans.
what both of
Okay,
you
I see
said, So,
now.
and I don't want to. I don't want to repeat the
Except
same
for maybe
stuff.
that black guy.
One of the questions that's someone has asked is, how will the approach to addressing discrimination and violence?
Do you notice that, like, this is a unique thing that I notice when I'm watching trans people give presentations, is they all act very childlike. Have any of you ever noticed this? And this is something that to a lesser extent I see on the left too, just in general, but with trans people specifically. Anytime I see them doing a presentation, they all act extremely childlike. And what I mean by that is they're all like, "Oh, you're so great. You're a legend." They all get embarrassed by speaking in public. It's like they act like teenagers. And I honestly wonder if there's something about their development that has like stunted them emotionally at like a certain age. So I don't know. Like you definitely noticed it with the blonde person who was like, "Oh, I don't even know why I'm on this panel," and it's like it's just very, very childlike. And then this guy here, even though he's like an older person, is like, "Oh, everyone's so great." It's just like I don't know. There's just something about the inflection.
Against trans people take into account factors like race and class and other characteristics that reflect that not all trans people experience oppression the same way. So I really want to stress that. We're NCLR helped start this new coalition called the LGBT Anti-Poverty Network, and that's one of the things we're really realizing more and more, that while it's important, it's critical, essential to have anti-discrimination protections that address sexual orientation and gender identity, that not all of the problems that our community faces fall neatly inside kind of an anti-discrimination framework. And just to take one example, there's probably more transgender people that go without health care because they can't afford it than because they're experiencing discrimination. There's a lot of discrimination. We need laws to address that. We need vigorous enforcement, but we also need to be pushing for more access to healthcare generally, so that everyone in our community, not just transgender people, but all LGBTQ people, have access, have healthcare in the first place. It's just one example. That's why we're really strongly supporting the push to get an increased minimum wage, which would be a huge boon to people in our community. So I think it's just important to remember that while we're thinking if our goal, which it is, I know, is to support and increase the health and well-being of everybody in our community, that we need to keep our eyes kind of on both of these frames: anti-discrimination, yes, but also just thinking about issues that disproportionately affect a lot of people in our community, and they don't come pre-packaged kind of in an LGBTQ anti-discrimination wrapper. I just want to mention too, since I work for one of the litigation groups, one of the things we're doing is like really coordinating all the post-Bostock cases that are bringing in federal sex discrimination claims in all kinds of areas: housing, healthcare, employment, schools, you name it. Working with all the other litigation groups to do that, and to make sure that all the private attorneys out there have the best arguments they can get, and to alert the Department of Justice under the Biden administration about cases where we want them to weigh in. And just one case that just, I don't know, some of you may have heard, This is one of NCLR's cases. We had a bitter, terrible loss just yesterday. It's from the Sixth Circuit. It's a pending call Merriweather, where horribly the Sixth Circuit held that it's okay that professors at public universities have a so-called free speech right or academic freedom right to misgender students in their class when they're calling on a transgender student. So that's...
Are they really upset that the courts upheld free speech? Wow. Okay. I want receipts about how big of a problem is it that professors are purposefully misgendering people in class? Because I don't think that's that big of a problem. I'm sorry. I don't believe it. Do you see even the disdain in which he said so-called free speech? Okay. So-called. So-called free speech protects your right to do this webinar without the government coming down on your ass too, regardless of whether Trump is in office or not.
It's horrible, and we'll be asking the Department of Justice to consider weighing in on that case, because we're going to ask the entire Sixth Circuit to rehear that case. The only other thing I wanted to particularly mention, a couple of other things, is one is like, it's so great, we're working with the State Department now to reinstate the focus. The State Department does this thing every year where they sort of analyze other countries and do country condition reports on countries across.
Do trans activists, and I really want to be careful to delineate trans activists from trans people, do trans activists actually think that they can force cultural acceptance by infringing on people's freedom of speech? Do they think that's going to help? It's not going to help. The only thing it's going to do is create a backlash against them. That's all it's going to do.
The world about how they're doing on human rights issues, and under the Trump administration, any attention to human rights abuses against our community, LGBTQ people, fell off the map. So we wanted them to put that back on the map, and just want the State Department generally in all of its activities across the globe to signal in every way it can that it really cares about the human rights of LGBTQ people. And super duper quick, before I kick it over to Kyler, just doing everything we can, work with the Department of Health and Human Services to really provide more support to families with LGBTQ kids, including, of course, families with transgender kids. All right, buddy, I'm going to kick it to you, Kyler.
Super duper. I figured out how to unmic myself. It's good to be here, and thanks for this opportunity to talk about things we'll be focusing on in this administration. As has been pointed out, I think this is one of the better administrations. And I remember during an early administration that President Biden, getting used to saying that, was the first person that said this is the window of time for the trans movement. So with that framework, no person is perfect. We always have to hold people accountable, but I do think we do have with him and Vice President Harris two good people in office as far as things we're looking for. I'm not going to speak to things that have already been spoken about, except intersectionality, which were things that I was going to speak about anyway.
Bingo word.
Because I don't think we have enough of it in the quote unquote movement. And I think there has to be more work done to really move the ball forward, because the movement simply parallels the greater.
So I just want to note, like, I'm probably not going to be doing as much commentary in this one, because this is an area where I am not, like, part of the reason I wanted to watch this is I don't have a lot of knowledge around this area, because it's kind of something that I purposefully avoided. So I'm learning this right alongside you guys. Like, I do the race stuff all the time. I feel like I could recite. I feel like I could probably recite a full presentation on critical race theory, like, off the top of my head, as though I were doing it as a leftist. That's how much I've watched this stuff. But like the trans stuff, I haven't really watched that much. So I really am paying attention to the chat. And if you guys have points that you think I've missed, just because this is a new topic for me, we're all learning this together. I do think it's important that we watch a variety of presentations, a variety of different perspectives. I just don't like, I'm feeling a little self-conscious that I'm not providing more commentary, just because this is an area that I'm picking up like in real time along with many of you.
Society in which we live. And within the movement, we have the microcosm of the world. And we just don't do enough race work. We don't do enough gender work. And we used to do that in the movement. And somehow we've changed the landscape of how we do the movement to transactions. And yes, and I'm a big one that's accused of always just focusing on the law and doing this, that, and the other. Trans people of color has always been an anomaly to people. And we kind of shift and change with the times and how we need to react, because we're not a major organization, but what we do is represent the interests of trans people of color. So what we will be doing is making sure more trans people of color voices are heard, and we've done that. We've done that traditionally by partnering with some of the groups, and we'll continue to do that to do the work. But as people saw this year, there were 10,000 Black trans people that showed up in Brooklyn for a march. And that's the power that you will be seeing wielded, because, and that it used to
Not
be by
sure I believe
2050,
that.
you would see
I'm not
brown
sure I
men of
believe that at
America,
all.
but that's now been moved to 2030. And you will hear these voices come together collectively and to demand things that impact people of color. And as my colleague who just spoke, and it's, we have to start looking at things that don't fall in the neat boxes. And I've always said that in this movement. And as Malcolm X would say, the chickens have come home to roost. Poverty is a huge issue in our movement, and it has to be looked at and addressed and calculated in all these factors. And we really missed the boat in doing that. You'll be seeing more organizing around that. Sustainable and living housing, number one, for our movement. We have, just besides children, we have adults that need housing. And we're talking about people of color. And we're not just talking about Black people because I'm Black, but a great amount of them are Black, because in this country, this is the heritage and history of our country, whether we want to own it or not. It's the truth. And then the other people of
he just got so defensive.
Like right now that we're
like it's like he does he think he's presenting to an audience that he needs to convince people to respect people, that to respect Black people and provide them with housing? And by provide them with housing, I mean like offer them a place to live that they pay rent or a mortgage for. I'm not saying provide free housing. I have no problem with trans people not being discriminated against in terms of housing, by the way. I think that that's extremely reasonable. But it's just like, it's interesting to me how defensive, because it's like had an attitude about like, dude, you don't need to convince anyone. Everyone is on your side. And this goes to show, it's like the woke sometimes are their own worst enemies, where they put themselves purposefully on the defensive. They put themselves purposefully in victim mode when no one's actually against you. Like, no one is against Black people. No one. You don't have to get defensive. You don't have to preemptively yell at anyone. No one's done anything to you.
In the Asian moment, like we didn't know that was coming, of how we disrespect Asian people in this country. And we haven't even brought up Native American people who are starving on the reservation, that we keep pushing them off the reservation that we promised them, that we still on their land, that we don't own, we're on Native land, and disrespect all the cultures and privilege of Native land. And we can go on with how we're treating other people that are brown in this country. And we treat all brown people like and including in the movement, like we're not humans, like we're breakable and indispensable. And that has to stop within this movement, because I watched this movement do what it's doing.
That was pretty close to a land blessing, wasn't it?
Black leaders in, but we still don't deal with the structural and systemic racism.
Systemic racism, bingo word.
That's what TPOC will be continuing to focus on and emphasize, while our peers don't.
Oh, it is called TPOC, trans people of color.
You can put all the Black leaders or brown leaders in place, but if you don't deal with the structures, you're still going to have them, and you're still going to miss the people. And so that's what we will be doing, and forming coalitions with the brown and Black groups that service our people, that have been servicing our people, whether they've been LGBTQ or T in the groups. Because while they may talk about us bad at church, they still feed us and house us. And so
He's so
we're going to be educating those
defensive.
people, and we're going to still be educating LGBTQ people that there's racism within this community, and we need to deal with it and bring it out and talk about it. We
Everyone
can't
just needs to
hire black
accept
leaders
us.
and put them in place and put them in as mouthpieces and hire
We're
certain
gonna
kinds of
educate
black
you.
people we want to work with.
It's like these
and
people are so
certain kinds
annoying,
of
and it's
Asian
not because
people we
they're
wanna work
trans.
with,
Like
and the ones that talk out.
these, like, people don't like these people, not because it doesn't matter that you're trans, it doesn't matter that you're black. It's you're annoying. You're demanding respect when you have done nothing to earn it except say, respect me, respect me, respect me. Why don't you respect me? Can't you just respect me? I'm going to educate you on why you should respect me. It's like, dude, settle down. Chill out. You are literally among friends in this presentation. Why are you yelling at the people watching this presentation as though they're not already on your side? It makes absolutely no sense at all.
We don't want to hire those people. So I probably have gone past my 5 minutes or whatever, but we have to deal with race. And until
And everyone's gonna be like, stunning and brave, stunning and brave. Watch, they're gonna be like, stunning and brave, because he's the only black person on the call. Stunning and brave.
Person that joined this movement, we still have not moved. So that's what TPOC will be doing. Oh, it's Chris Hayashi's turn. Chris,
thanks, Kyler. It's great to be here with everyone. And before I get going, I saw that someone had put in the chat question. There's a couple of questions in the chat around the anti-trans legislation happening at the state level. And I'm assuming that we'll have some time to talk about that later, because it's definitely important. And there's definitely some key strategies I know we're all moving to fight back against those. So in terms of priorities for TLC, for the Transgender Law Center, the first thing I'll start out with is that one of the things that we launched last year, and we kind of launched in full just about a month ago, is the Trans Agenda for Liberation. So this is a blueprint, a guidepost for trans movements, for movements broadly. It was created by a national coalition.
Liberation from what?
Primarily Black and Brown trans leaders, primarily Black and Brown trans women. It's a combination of issue analysis, concrete policy recommendations, and calls to action, whether it's to religious institutions, to the broader movement, or to foundations. And to what other folks have spoken to, I just want to raise up the first pillar, which is Black trans women living and leading fiercely. This pillar was created by Black trans women
living
femmes,
and leading
and it lays
fiercely.
out solutions by Black trans women femmes to specifically address the violence and murders of broadly of trans people, specifically of trans women of color and Black trans women and femmes. So this is really our guideposts and our priorities as we move forward. I encourage folks to check it out. Some other priorities that I have that I wanted to raise up, in addition to what other folks have shared, is this is definitely a time to reimagine public safety, to call for decarceration, and to call for sex worker rights. We saw over the past year, as Kyler spoke to and others have spoken to, the uprisings that happened all across the country and the globe in response to the continued murders of Black people. And we know that trans people, particularly Black trans women and femmes, continue to be murdered at astronomical rates. So we're calling for divestment from police forces, for
defunding the police. Okay, got it. Defunding the police.
To a ban on solitary confinement, to a repeal on laws that police and target the homeless and those living in poverty. Other folks have raised up the importance of us.
I don't know that I actually have a problem with
poverty
that.
And economic justice in our movements, and to really redefine sex work.
See, you know what pisses me off about this is I actually don't like, if we're just looking at it on face value and we're taking the trans stuff out of it, I actually don't have a problem with anything that they're saying. I also don't actually, this might piss people off, I don't have a problem with sex workers. I think that if that is what you want to do, then I don't think that that should be criminalized in any way, because you're a consenting adult that is making that choice, and that is your choice. And I don't have to agree with your choice in order to respect your right to make a choice that I do not agree with. So I actually don't have much problem with any of those things, but I'm just really annoyed that it's being part of like this activist agenda. And so it kind of like it innately wants me to like I innately want to like fight back against it, even though like I'm not like really upset about it. I don't know. It's kind of like a weird thing. No.
Without criminal stigma. So to really push for the decriminalization of sex work. We also think it's important to prioritize the needs of people living with disabilities. Particularly in this time of COVID-19 and the global pandemic, we are seeing the ways in which decisions are being made about who's worthy of life, who's worthy of care, and who's not. And we know that that disproportionately is going to impact people with disabilities and always has, as well as folks at the intersection of people of color, Black folks, women, trans folks with disabilities. So we need to continue to raise up that issue and really prioritize investing resources in community needs assessments, in community-based solutions, in health and wellness solutions for folks living with disabilities.
Yeah, actually, Nat D is making a really good point in the chat. And I want to, so Nat D says decriminalization is good, legalization not so much. I don't have a problem as much with legalization, but my problem with it is that it so like in regards to like, you know, weed and stuff, I think that that should be decriminalized, but not necessarily, I'm not necessarily as in favor of like legalizing it. And I would imagine this is true of sex work as well, because once you legalize it, then it's taxable. But if you just decriminalize it, it means that they won't be arrested for it, but it won't be taxable. So I don't know. I go back and forth sometimes with these issues, but I understand what you're saying there.
That I'll lift up is that for years, TLC, along with other organizations such as Familia Trans Queer Liberation Movement, the Black LGBTQ Migrant Project, and Mi Gente, have been calling for an end to trans detention. We know that trans migrants in detention face horrific violence.
Wait, they broke, then don't break the law.
And we know that people have been murdered.
Then don't break the law.
Roxana Hernandez, Joanna Medina. And
you shouldn't get special rights, dude. Don't break the law.
If there was any time
listen,
for us to double down on that, particularly.
Listen, I had a friend that went to jail for a crime he didn't commit. And when he first went to jail, he got the living crap beat out of him every single day. Got the shit kicked out of him. And he was like not that big of a guy. He was a big guy by the time he left jail. He was not a big guy when he went into jail. And so because he was getting the shit kicked out of him every single day, they put him in solitary confinement. Now that sucked because he was in solitary confinement, but it did protect him from getting the shit kicked out of him. He was in solitary confinement for a really long time before he ended up going to like federal prison, and it was a whole big fucking rigmarole. Anyway, my point is that you can't in the same sentence argue for getting rid of solitary confinement entirely, and in the same like breath basically say we don't want people to be put in jail at all when they break the law because they might get killed. Well, in some cases, like solitary confinement can actually protect them from being killed. So which do you want? If you don't want to go to jail, don't break the law.
During this time of COVID, when folks in prisons, in jails, and detention are particularly vulnerable and are the least likely to be receiving health care and preventive.
But I will say I'm not in favor of them going to jail for victimless crimes.
The other area that we really want to prioritize is the ways in which we know that trans young people in schools face horrific amounts of violence and harassment and discrimination. And we also want to raise up the ways in which trans young people also face harassment and abuse by police in schools. Nationally, trans young people, particularly Black and brown youth, have been calling for police out of schools. And we saw over the past year,
I don't think police should be in schools. I would agree with this. I do not think police should be in schools, not just because of trans people, because of everyone. I don't agree with that.
Schools all across the country and really raise up the leadership of trans young people themselves. And the last area that I want to raise up, I know other folks have talked about healthcare and healthcare continuing to be a need for our communities, is This is also really a time where we need to look at the ways in which trans people living with HIV, many of whom are Black and brown trans women, look at the ways in which people are criminalized. So we are calling and pushing for an end to the laws that criminalize HIV. So to raise up that
What laws
there are
criminalize
laws that
HIV?
criminalize people living with HIV in many states across the
Wait,
country.
I'm really confused. When did it become a crime to live with HIV? And by the way, like, I think they would have a stronger argument if they weren't just making it about all trans people all the time. Like, if something isn't working for the trans community, chances are that it's not actually working for other people too. I think police and schools are actually a really good example of this. I don't think police should be in schools at all. They're making the argument based on the fact that they're claiming that police and schools harass trans people at probably a disproportionately higher rate. Fine, but why should they be in schools at all? Like, that's actually a much stronger argument. But are we talking about? Okay, is this what we're saying about criminalizing? Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sorry if you're having unprotected sex with someone and you don't tell them you have HIV. That I'm sorry, you're actually putting them through actions of your own at risk of getting I guess it's not really a lifelong disease. But again, that's true of everyone. It's not as though trans people are the only people getting HIV. Gay people can get HIV, straight people can get HIV. It's not as though this is just a problem that's exclusive to the trans community. And that's also like, I disagree with how they're characterizing this. They're saying that it's criminalizing HIV. No, it's not. It's not criminalizing it at all.
Including Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Pennsylvania, and Texas. And we know the ways in which that disproportionately impacts trans folks, Black and brown trans women, and it results in even more people being incarcerated. And it's beyond time for us to repeal those laws. So I'll close with that.
Thank you for that, Chris, and thank you everyone for some really fantastic responses. I just have one additional question before opening up to audience questions, and that is a sort of visionary question. Where do you hope trans rights will be in 4 years from now? And I'll start with Sasha.
Great, thanks, Jenny. I'll make this brief because I know people are probably itching to throw some questions for us. So I think one thing that I'll talk about that's a little outside my lane is that I feel like there's a drastic need to humanize trans people across the board. I mean, Laverne Cox we're all familiar with Laverne Cox, but unfortunately, I think that we need we need some kind of breakthrough, like an Ellen breakthrough or a Will and Grace breakthrough or something where there's a character on TV that people can relate to that is not a victim.
Okay, so in order to have that happen, then you need to not be demanding that you get to have your people featured in everything. I'm sorry, like the fact that, like, okay, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. What I meant is you have to allow trans people to be made fun of. That's what I meant. I said it horribly at first, and I want to retract. You have to allow trans people to be made fun of if you want them to be humanized. If people cannot tell jokes about trans people, they're not going to be humanized. But every single time someone tells a joke about a trans person, people like this are going to rise up and be like, "Oh, transphobe, transphobe, transphobe." If you think that it's not okay for trans women to compete in women's sports, you're going to be called a transphobe. If you think that frankly any actor should be able to play a trans character, then you're going to be accused of being a transphobe. These people generally have no sense of humor and they ruin everything for themselves. If you really want to put a trans entertainer front and center, or even like as a sidekick, then you need to allow them to be made fun of. That is what will humanize them. That is what will make them relatable. If you can't make fun of someone, then they aren't like really being humanized. I'm sorry.
But is somebody that is lovable. So that's a little outside my lane, but I just feel like there needs to be I would love in the next 4 years to see a little bit of a more intentional communications strategy of humanizing trans people, because there's so much mythology and fear about our existence and our lives that I feel like the right wing really preys upon that, with people that aren't familiar with trans people and don't have, it's different than the
Well, and the other
LGBT
thing too,
community, because
if you want to humanize trans people and just have people see you as normal human beings, then I'm sorry, like it can't be like everything about you has to be trans this, trans that, trans this, trans that, trans all the time. I would have to assume that being trans is actually probably one of the least interesting things about any of the people on these panels. Trans people have interests too. They have hobbies. They have passions. They're just like cisgendered people in many respects, except they happen to be trans, which is one component of who they are, but it is not the entire breadth of who they are. And so if you want to be accepted as a fully like multidimensional human being, then stop pushing the trans stuff all the time. And that's not to say that you should be ashamed of who you are, because I don't believe you should be ashamed of who you are in any way. I believe you should be able to live your best life, use your pronouns, dress however you want, present however you want. I don't really care. But if everything about you is just about being, I'm trans, I'm trans, I'm trans, if that's everything there is to know about you, then you are not a multidimensional human being. And quite frankly, you make it really difficult for people to even want to get to know you. I don't care to get to know any of these people at this point. All I see in these people, and it makes me sad, maybe the Asian guy is like probably the least problematic for me. But like all I know about these people is that they're trans activists. That's it. I don't have any desire to hang out with them. I don't have any desire to like shoot the shit with them over a beer or a cocktail, because they haven't shown me that they're capable of being normal human beings and not activists.
We're about a tenth of the size, and so it's really hard to do that work. So it'd be great if the large LGBT groups like us would spend a little more energy humanizing and just having more. That's why it's so important, as Mara mentioned earlier, to make sure that there's folks in the Biden administration that are forward facing, that deconstructs some of the mythology that's out there. So I'd love to see that. I think that one thing I would really love that's already been mentioned is that about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of work being done on criminal justice reform. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, that is kind of wilted, unfortunately, in some ways, for prisons and jails and in detention, and not with GLC and a lot of other groups, but I just would love to see more infusion of energy and resources into that work specifically. Non-discrimination protections are great, and we should continue to work on them, but I would love to see a pivot in the next 4 years to that work because of the horrific conditions that trans people and non-binary experience in prisons and jails. And lastly, I'll just tag on to what's already been said. I feel like there's such a rich opportunity for us to think more intersectionally specifically about legislation and litigation both. When we think about writing bills, non-discrimination provisions or whatever, we should think beyond gender identity and sexual orientation. We should be thinking about immigration status. We should be thinking about, the things
never mind.
If you want to build
other
a coalition,
immutable characteristics,
other,
got it.
Civil and human rights
other immutable
movements to recognize the importance of our work in our lives. It's important that we recognize, the intersectionality of all of our identities and to bring in some of that thinking. Some of that's happening. I'm really excited about it. There's a couple of cases that we have at Lambda Legal that have, thought deeper about like bringing in disability issues into our litigation and legislation. But I just would love us to collaborate more and maybe create like a think tank or something along those lines that really starts to dig deep into what that actually might look like. I can only speak to the policy and the legal aspect, but I think that there's really a rich opportunity to think about voting rights and immigration rights and so many other issues that we just usually don't really consider when we're embarking on some of these initiatives that we get into. So I will stop there and thank you so much.
Yeah, Sasha, I think that's right, and that really mirrors what other folks have been saying. Shannon, you brought up the notion of healthcare and it being and the difference between discrimination and poverty. Our U.S. Trans Survey shows that we asked people, if you needed to see a medical provider in the last year, did you go? And if you didn't go, why not? And 23% of the trans people in the survey said they didn't go because they were afraid of disrespect or discrimination.
Well, so
but
what?
33%
That's
said
their
they didn't go
choice.
because they couldn't afford it.
Oh,
And we always
that's
need to
not as much
remember
their
that.
choice.
It depends on who you are and what day it is. What's the most important issue for you? There are so many issues that are life and death. You know, Chris talked about things, you know, the immigration and detention is a life or death issue for a lot of trans people. Racism is a life or death issue for a lot of trans people. And trying to put together the movement that looks at all of that is a work in progress, and going beyond our movement. You know, the way we do the way that people in the United States do policy work is changing pretty dramatically. You know, democracy is at stake. Whether you think democracy is, you know, has met its promise or not, I think most of us don't think so. It's also on super shaky ground. We have to be worried about things
Democracy
like,
is not on shaky ground.
Voting and
If only.
and money in politics and things like that. So trying to have a more holistic movement, I think would be good. I think we've moved kind of far in that. And Sasha, you're probably right. You know, the prevalence of issues kind of goes up and down. And that's a problem. Like if we're doing less criminal justice and jails and prison work than we were before, we collectively, or we NCTE, that's a problem. And so I think we just have to keep thinking bigger, more intersectional.
Why is prison work and criminal justice reform like their number one issue? Because, I mean, okay, I don't want to be naive, but aren't there like a lot of trans people who aren't in jail that have needs too? So why are they so focused on criminal justice reform? Now, and again, I'm not necessarily actually opposed to criminal justice reform. I just find it curious that we've probably heard more about criminal justice reform than like any other issue, up to and including healthcare, which if we're talking about a trans person, healthcare would actually be what I would think their number one issue would be. But that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be all about criminal justice reform.
And more broadly. Shannon, your turn.
Okay, cool. Well, I love this question about what do we want to see in the next 4 years. And I just want to mention one thing, but it's so near and dear to my heart. What I hope is that 4 years from now, we have completely transformed the way we as a movement think about transgender youth issues. And that is, in particular, I really hope that we can get away from this model that's we've all been trapped in for a way too long time, where we see, like, we think of transgender children and kids as like little adults and just think of them in isolation from their families and communities. And that has got to change. It is really not an effective way to go at issues affecting young people, because they are not.
I absolutely agree with what this person is saying. You notice I've just taken to calling them, all of them, this person, because I don't know what their pronouns are and I don't want to be disrespectful. But I absolutely agree that you should not be treating trans kids as just little adults that are fully capable of making all decisions. I agree with that. But let's see where this person is going with it.
Little adults. They critically need their families and their communities.
Yes.
Most, you know, the model that we've had for way too long, which was the main message we have to tell young people who are dealing with family rejection or problems at school, is just like, try to hang on, and when you're 18 you can.
I feel like there's a but coming. Like, I feel like there's a but.
Really terrible, ridiculous message, and we need to
the other shoe's going to drop.
Massively increase the energy, the resources, the intention that we give to families with LGBTQ kids, including particularly transgender kids. It needs to be across the board, racially and religiously diverse families. We just need a whole transformed mindset about that. And while it's so important to create resources for transgender kids, the appallingly high number of transgender kids who end up homeless or in the so-called juvenile justice system or in the child welfare system, God help them, because these systems are brutal and terrible and cause enormous harm to all young people who are in them. No young people should be in these systems. We've got to, while we continue to, advocate for good policies in those systems and more support for the kids in those systems, we need to keep our kids out of those systems. So we need to really flip the way we're looking at these issues and working on them and thinking about them. We need, the same way we have in a prison abolition movement, we need a child welfare system abolition movement and a juvenile justice system abolition movement. And there is one. There's an up-in campaign to,
again, we're back to
abolish the
prison
child
reform
welfare
and
system.
justice
As we
reform.
know,
I don't understand it.
LGBTQ people need to be an active and big part of that campaign. So if you don't know about it, I really urge you to learn more about it. I'll stop there and kick it back over to Kyler.
I didn't have substantive disagreement with pretty much anything he said. So
Wow.
stunning and brave.
It's hard to imagine in 4 years, but I would like something that's already been said that I think is true, and Sasha said it, the humanization of trans people. I think that was something that was very effective, important in the gay, now the queer movement. And I worked at HRC and watched Elizabeth Birch work that and make it done. And that was the Wheel of Grace moment. I worked there during that time and watched our gay sticker change from, I forgot what it was, and we went to the equal rights symbol. Not that I'm supporting that's what we did, but that's what happened. And that was a huge moment in history. But the gay movement was different. And I actually have been on a ton of panels and webinars the last couple of weeks talking about it. And I can say to people in that moment, remember when people told you to leave your baggage at the door, and they would walk you out of the meeting, and then we did the work. And that hasn't happened in the trans movement. So there's so much stuff going on at meetings, and I'm always ready to take the bullets. I've been taking bullets for years. And that sounds horrible, but it's the truth. And that's what they are. So I'm ready to take whatever people have to throw at me for saying the truth. But we bring our dysfunction with us to do the work. And you couldn't do that anymore in the gay movement. People would walk you right out of that meeting. And when I say that to people that are part of that movement, they remember those times, because we had the same dysfunction in that movement. But when you brought it to that meeting, they would walk you right out of there, and they'd say, oh yeah, but here's a therapist card, and I'm here for you to support you after the meeting. And we have to bring that responsibility as trans people to these meetings when we're ready to do the work, because that's one of the ways we're going to propel forward. And I would love to see us get there.
He's not saying anything of substance.
That Will and Grace moment or that Ellen moment, just because I always continue to say when I give speeches, we teach people how to treat us.
Yes.
And a therapist tells us that individually. So we're teaching people how to treat us by the way we treat each other as trans people. And there is some truth to that, because I actually just did a webinar to a corporation, and they said, wow, we like because I don't go out with the victim mentality.
Yes, you do, dude. You've been a victim this entire presentation. Oh,
and,
God.
That's the truth and the reality. So people say, why are you don't bring that whole victim thing?
If you have to say you don't go out of a victim mentality, you're probably going out with a victim mentality.
No matter how hard.
This guy is awful.
And some people on this call,
not because he's trans or because he's black, he's just like a victim, and it's annoying.
And I have never shown everybody how hard it's been, because you'll never know, because they taught me to not let people know.
Oh my God! This guy is now doing. This guy is now doing he's doing a soliloquy about how hard his life has been, when he's also in the same breath saying, I'm not a victim. I'm not a victim. I never talk about being a victim, but let me tell you how hard my life has been. And it's been really hard. It's been harder than you'll ever know. And I never get to talk about it because I'm not a victim. Like, that's literally what he's doing right now. He's doing a soliloquy about not being a victim when he's actually acting like a victim.
Do what you have to do to make it work. You make lemonade out of lemons. But however, they had it worse than I did. So I would say that, and I think we'll get some functionality, and we will get everybody's participation in the movement. And that's what I would also like to see, is everybody's participation within this movement. And I've been happy to work on the trans ban and getting, the largest employer of Black people in the country is the US military. But yet all we ever see soldier-wise in anything are white soldiers.
No.
And it's like, but I've been digging out the brown and Black soldiers who are there, because where do we go when we get in trouble? And I know that from being a lawyer, because I've worked out many deals with prosecutors to get people out of town and keep their records clean. It's like, hey, I work out this deal, they're going to go to the military, because that's what we do as poor people too. And that's bringing that lens of all the intersectionality. It all can work together, because it did in the gay movement that has propelled itself and has advanced from the
Bye,
trans
Deborah. Have a good
movement.
one.
And so we have to learn from other movements. And that's how we grow, because that's how the gay movement did it. That's how the women's movement did it. That's how the Black movement did it. They didn't just look at it and it just come out of the sky. So all this intersectionality can work together and advance us. So I would like to see some more of that. And then we get the youth in and take care of them. And then we're back to these prisoners that are dying and being killed and raped and abused that we have just ignored for the last 8 to 10 years, that we have not done any of that work in, that I still take cases on and do, and take pro bono, and then take 20 other jobs to pay the bills. We have got.
I do not believe for one red second that this person is a competent lawyer. I'm just going to say that. Competent lawyers are able to tell a story succinctly to a group of people, to be persuasive. I don't even know what this guy is saying. I don't believe for one red second that he is a competent lawyer. I'm sorry. And that, again, that has nothing to do with him being Black or trans or anything else. It has to do with his personality and him being a victim.
To address these issues, and they can be done holistically, and they can be done in tandem, because we are losing too many people. Besides the 50% suicide, we are losing them in the systems, which I agree.
All he's doing is saying buzzwords and
we have to get our people out of the systems,
catchphrases and all this other stuff.
Putting our people into the systems, and if we don't take care of them, who will take care of them? So we can do this, people. It is doable. So, and it is doable within 4 years, and we don't have to rely on other people. We can do it now. Let's get together and do it. And we have a favorable administration. It's our framework of thinking that thinks we can't do it. It's doable.
All right.
Thanks, Kyler. Absolutely. Definitely for TLC, the incarceration and the horrific conditions that trans people face in prisons, jails, and detention are a major priority. So thank you for raising that up. This is a great question. So I'll start by saying that, thanks to Black and brown women, thanks to Native communities, thanks to disability justice organizers, thanks to folks in the South, right? Trump is out of office. So we have a less hostile administration, absolutely. And thinking towards the next 4 years.
How do you think they're going to feel about if we go to war with Russia and they have to draft people to go to war? How do you think that these people would react if they wanted to draft trans men to go into the military? Would they want trans men to be drafted to go to war with Russia? That's a question I would like to see them answer. How would you react if the draft included trans men and it was enacted to go to war with Russia? Would you be supportive of trans men being included in the draft? Or do you want them to be included when it's on your terms, but not when they actually have to go to war? That's the question I have.
I think it's important that we, however, do not sleep on the fact that the forces that allowed Trump to be in office, the forces of hate, intolerance, white supremacy, still exist. And they are stronger than they have ever been.
Like the nods, the solemn nods.
Look to the
like, yes,
onslaught of
stunning and brave.
legislation.
Stunning and brave.
We can just look to the recent murders in Atlanta of Asian women massage workers.
That had nothing to do
We
with being
know that these
Asian. It had to do
forces
with
are as
them
strong
being
as
like
they
a
have
guy having
ever
a sex
been,
addiction.
And we need to continue to move forward strategies
My
that really
God.
fight back against these forces of violence, hate, and white supremacy that are clearly not just here in the U.S., right? But it's a global movement that we have to contest with. So I will also say that while 2020 was horrific and so much harm was caused and we lost so many people, that I think it's critical that we raise up also the powerful and beautiful opportunities, wins that we also saw during 2020, because I think it's critical that we, not as the COVID-19 pandemic perhaps becomes a bit more manageable, and as we are no longer under a Trump administration, that we don't just return to how things were.
Yes, COVID-19 has become significantly more manageable under Joe Biden, as have world affairs and foreign relations. Joe Biden just made everything better. It was all Trump's fault. We're now rid of him. Look at how much better we are with 6% inflation, with gas prices about to go through the roof, with Afghanistan being a giant fucking mess, with about to go to war with Russia just because, with Joe Biden. Did you guys hear this? Side note, did you guys hear? This was in the New York Times today. They were talking about how the Biden administration gave China all of their classified intelligence on Russia because they were trying to convince China to use their influence to get Putin to back off. And then China gave our classified intelligence directly to Russia. That is the competence of the Biden administration. They gave our classified intel on what Putin was doing to China, and then China then gave that to Russia. But no mean tweets. Okay.
Last year, we saw people rise up all across the country. We saw the call to defund the police and invest in communities become a national conversation. We, with other organizations, put together a letter. Over 175 LGBT organizations signed on to a call to defund the police and invest in communities. This is a moment that we have not seen before. We also saw in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, you know, trans people, particularly Black, Indigenous people of color, trans women, and trans people, did what we have literally always done, right? We knew that if we didn't look out for each other, that others likely wouldn't. And we unfortunately saw that happen. So trans people all across the country organized so that our communities had food, housing, access to healthcare, access to preventive supplies, primarily led by Black trans women. House of Tulips, Brave Space Alliance in Chicago, My Sister's House, like so many organizations, just making sure that our communities lived, right, and survived through 2020 and the global pandemic and all of what 2020 was. And those are things that our communities have always done, and did them even more so and more powerfully during what was and continues to be a global crisis. So, you know, as I think about the next 4 years, I know that our movements are actually stronger than we have ever been, despite facing ongoing attacks, ongoing violence, harassment, discrimination, and just lack of what we need to survive.
If all these attacks that we've been hearing about through this entire presentation are so obvious, then why aren't they giving specifics? Why have they given a grand total of 0 specifics about stats or data or even case studies about all these obvious attacks? I want statistics. I don't want to just keep hearing about how bad things are. Back it up. Provide receipts.
And thrive. And my hope is that trans organizations, particularly those led by Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities who have done so much, particularly during the last year, that we get the resources support and infrastructure that we deserve and that we have always needed for our communities to survive and thrive. I also hope that we continue, as other folks have spoken to this, continue to build cross movement.
You know what's so
If
sad
there's anything we learn
is I really don't think that these people, and by these people I mean the people in this presentation right now, I don't think that they would know how to function if they actually had or felt like they had full acceptance. Even if everyone in their lives, everyone they ever interact with just totally accepted them and didn't care if they were trans and didn't care about any of this stuff, I actually don't think that any of these people would know how to function in that environment, because they would constantly be on the lookout for slights or microaggressions or things that they could take out of context to be like, why do you hate me because I'm trans? Like, generally speaking, no one cares that you're trans. Okay, maybe some people do, and I'm not in the favor of the way those people behave. But I think if you took any of these 6 people, except for maybe that older dude with the goatee, the white one, I think if you took any one of them and put them into a magical universe where everyone just accepted them just as they are and they had everything that they needed and no one even cared that they were trans, I don't think that they would know how to function in that environment, because they are so used to seeing themselves as oppressed and as victims that they would constantly be on guard looking for that next thing. And what that means, yeah, Phoenix Eclipse says they don't accept themselves. If you want to feel accepted by other people, then you need to accept yourself first. That's just the way it is. If you don't accept yourself first and foremost, you will never feel accepted by the people that you're around.
from 2020 that we need to be working in coalition and partnership with other movements for which we are a part, whether it's climate justice, whether it's immigrant rights, whether it's racial justice and racial equity. Because I saw too often that if we were not there, we were not spoken of, we were not included. And so that's so critical for us to be building with those spaces, because it literally, and we saw this and we continue to see this, like literally our people's lives depend on it.
Literally.
And then the last thing that I'll say
We're
is
literally
that
dying.
again, like I do not think that we should be returning back to how things were before. There is an opportunity right now for us to make bold demands, right? We can say we need to end trans detention. We need to abolish ICE. We need to defund the police. We need to be leaning into those bold demands and not backing up from them because we are now in a less hostile administration. We need to lead with visions of what our communities need, of what we know. Like we know the strategies, we know the solutions, we know what will actually make our communities' lives better, right? And that we need to, this is a time to lead with those and not put those on the back burner for when we can come back.
Wow, some amazing wisdom. Thank you all.
Stunning and
I'll
brave.
now open
Stunning
up to
and brave.
audience question. If you have a question,
Excellent
please put it in the
questions.
Q&A function. And panelists, don't feel you have to answer every question. We're not going to get to every question that's asked. We'll try to get through as many as possible. Bunch of questions in regards to the anti-trans state laws and what the hell we're going to do about trans
I liked that
women
Asian guy
athletes
before.
not
I don't
being
like
able
him
to
anymore.
compete, about trans youth not having access to healthcare, to the Arkansas law allowing medical providers to deny treatment to LGBTQ folks.
Man.
Anyone to address what we should be doing around those, or what you all are doing around those questions?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
What the hell we're going to do about the anti-trans state laws?
Oh,
what is being done?
What are the anti-trans
Gotcha.
laws? Like the child transition stuff?
Well,
What are the anti-trans laws?
I think Mara, you want to go first? Go right ahead.
Go ahead, Kyler, if you want to.
I just was hearing the question. Go right ahead.
Well, it's a problem.
What are they?
It's a problem. It will be eventually, I think we'll eventually figure out how to do it better. We're going to win most of the states, but that we're losing any of them at all is just horrible. That these bills are even being introduced is
It's got to be
sending
the
a
child
message to
transition
kids that
laws,
is
right?
just,
Yeah, it's the child
just
transition laws.
absolutely shameful. And honestly, I don't think we have a sufficient grip on it yet. This seems
Why
to
do they
be
want kids
something
to
that
medically transition?
our people have been able to try to get a toehold on. We will figure it out. We will resolve it. But right now it's really hard. And I think most of our organizations and most of our people are trying to figure out how to do it. Yeah, so I'll say that.
Yeah, this is a crisis. I just want to jump in, y'all. This is an absolute crisis. I mean,
Why? Why
under
is it a
attack.
crisis?
Trans kids are the focus
Why?
in a way that is new, is really scary, and is working. I mean, yeah, like we went through this with the bathroom bills, but only one state passed the bathroom bill. We're already way past that with these trans sports bills, and
the trans sports
even
bills.
scarier class of bills that actually makes it a crime, a felony for doctors to provide transition-related health care to minors. I mean, this is about as serious as it gets.
Because children shouldn't be
Every single
medically
person on
transitioning.
this, listening to this,
Because children
makes a pledge
whose brains are not fully developed to make logical and rational decisions should not be transitioning. And they certainly shouldn't be transitioned by their schools without telling their parents. This is a bad idea. I don't know why trans activists support this stuff. I really don't. It only sets their movement back. M169, thank you for the super chat. No hate intended. They couldn't accept the reality of their own bodies. But why would they be able to accept their people who don't care about them being trans? Listen, I wouldn't say that they don't accept the reality of their own bodies. That's like saying that anyone who gets plastic surgery doesn't accept the reality of their own bodies. They want to live and be and present in a certain way. I don't think that that's the same thing of not accepting the reality of their bodies. In fact, I think that that is absolutely accepting the reality of their bodies and then going out of their way to say, my body isn't what I want it to be, and I want to make it what I want it to be. Now, people do this all the time. Listen, I have tattoos. Am I not accepting the reality of my body because I have tattoos? No, I've just elected to have art put on my body because I think it's beautiful and because that's the way I want to present. And I don't actually view that as different than any permanent transition because tattoos are permanently on my body unless I get them lasered off, which I'm not inclined to do. So I wouldn't say that. Why would they be able to accept their people who don't care about them being trans? I mean, that is a completely separate issue. And again, it goes back to self-acceptance. If you accept yourself, it doesn't really matter what other people think about you. So it's not actually about other people at all. It's about every single thing that you see in someone else is reflecting what is happening to you. I disagree, M169. Listen, this tattoo is on my body permanently. It's on my arm. I can cover it up if I want to, but I could also get a tattoo. I've actually thought about getting my head tattooed. I've thought about it. Maybe I'll do it someday. Be able to shave my head, have a beautiful tattoo. That's a permanent change to your body. It's no different than getting surgery. I mean, in fact, it is actually a very surgical procedure if you've never had like a tattoo. Like, I mean, it's a permanent change. And that's not cutting off my boobs or anything, but it is a permanent change that I would actually have to go and get undone if I wanted it to. So I don't perceive it to be different. It's more socially accepted, but I don't actually perceive it to be different. And at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter if anyone else accepts this tattoo or not, or any of the 9 tattoos I have. It all comes down to like, I accept myself. I think it's beautiful. I think it's awesome. And so I do it. And I don't need anyone else's approval. These people, the problem these people have is not that they've permanently changed their body in some way. It's that they are constantly looking for validation from others when in fact they should only be looking for validation in and of themselves. Well, you're changing the topic to kids, though, Olivia. I'm not in favor of kids medically transitioning. I don't think many people are in favor of kids medically transitioning.
To do something to help.
But as an adult, that's the choice that they made. Many adults regret tattoos. And then they get to make the choice. They either go get them lasered off or they learn to live with them. It's the same thing. Like, once you're an adult, you should be able to make whatever decisions you want.
Help us be back these bills. I mean, that usually means calling your state legislators or plugging into whatever efforts are going on in your state. But this is like a major wake-up call to us that there is a huge orchestrated backlash going on to the progress that we have made around trans rights, and we've got to.
I wouldn't say it's orchestrated. I would say people are actually upset.
That means many things. One of the things it means, I saw a question in here from Lee Badgett about this, is we have got to do a bazillion times better job at learning how to talk to people who don't already agree with us and who don't already understand transgender identity. We've got to get better at talking to conservative people in this country.
Well, the first step to that is that you don't educate them. You just actually talk to them.
Paying the price for that, failing on our part right now, are children, our transgender children.
Well, he is absolutely correct that they do need to get better at talking to people who disagree with them. But what I suspect he means is they need to go in and educate conservatives, because conservatives are just not educated about what is going on. And that's not going to work either. They actually have to listen to them. There's not a lot of listening going on from this community with people that have legitimate concerns about trans women competing in women's sports, that have legitimate concerns about lesbians being told that they need to date someone with a dick or else they're a transphobe, that have legitimate concerns with children medically transitioning and doing permanent damage to their body if they're not really trans and they're following some sort of fad or they just want attention, or worse yet, some guidance counselor has decided that they're trans and is now inflicting that on them when they're not really trans. They could be autistic. They could just be weird. They could just not conform into gender stereotypes. All of these things are very real and very valid concerns that these people don't listen to.
Their families. So that's my, sorry to get up on a soapbox about that, but it's just really concerning.
Oh, hang on. I'm about to finish my beer. We have half an hour left. So I get to have my second beer. Yay. That beer was really good. A little bit bitter, but definitely tasted like candy. Now we're going to go on to the cherry pie beer. I'm hoping for a nice deep red with this beer. We're going to see. Oh, very pink. Another pink one. Oh, look how deep that's getting. Oh, look how pretty. Oh, it is deep red. It's like blood. This is like a vampire beer. I feel like I'm a vampire and I'm drinking a glass of blood. Look at how beautiful that is. Holy cow. Let's see if it smells like cherries. It smells like pastry. It actually does smell like pastry. I'm not making that up. Cheers, darlings. Happy Friday. Oh, that is delightful. What it is it's actually kind of savory. And then it has a little sweet kick just at the end, but it is actually like a really savory beer. And then just a nice little sweet kick, like you've sprinkled a little bit of sugar on top. That's what it tastes like. Delicious.
And no, and thank you, Mara and Shannon. And why I didn't hear the question was because I was responding to a report on that exact question or issue. So just to emphasize what Mara and Shannon are saying, it's a fire. We've got to put it out. And I just want to back both of what they're saying. And that's why I didn't hear the question, because I have a reporter calling me about this issue.
Oh, aren't you so important?
So just echoing what they said.
And
I
I
really
can
don't
chime
like
in
this
too. I don't
person.
want to message people to death here, but I think it's really important. It's not messaging, it's just the truth that, trans athletes, there were 60,000 trans athletes who are eligible to participate consistently with their gender identity, and they've been able to do so in states with non-discrimination protections for many years, and this idea that somehow trans girls are going to ruin women's sports has just never, been the case in any of those places. There's never been a trans woman who's competed in the Olympics. This idea
There
that
has
somehow,
now.
it's a boogeyman that's being raised, and this kind of goes back to this issue of humanizing trans people to some degree. I think it's really important to keep reminding people
But
that
this
these are
doesn't
human beings and
humanize
these are
them.
children.
Listen,
on the legal front,
so look at that swimmer from Penn, right? That swimmer that just became the all Ivy champion and demolished the previous record. That didn't humanize trans people. That actually put more of a target on your back because you guys are not paying attention to the fact that people don't like seeing men who transitioned within the last year competing against women who did not go through male puberty. That's not going to humanize you. If you want to be humanized, then have a trans best friend on a sitcom that is made fun of. But you won't allow that because that doesn't align with your agenda.
I think it is important to remember too that what this is about is excluding trans people.
No, gender dysphoria is having your brain develop in a different way. I don't think it's denying the reality of their sex. It's having your brain develop in a different way. And the way to cure that is to live in the way that you feel most comfortable based on how your brain developed. That is not the same thing as not accepting the reality of one's sex. Blair White has gender dysphoria. Blair White very clearly accepts the reality that Blair White is a biological male. Blair White's not denying anything just because she's living as a woman rather than as a man. That is just fundamentally wrong, M169. I just have to disagree.
Altogether from participating. A trans girl is not going to participate on a boys' team. A trans girl is a girl, and what these laws do is they prohibit her from participating altogether. And and that's not me saying that. That's a Trump-appointed judge in Idaho in a preliminary injunction decision saying that. He equated it to before marriage equality. He equated it to people making the argument that, a same-sex couple can still marry an opposite sex.
I mean, I'm not trying to be argumentative with you at all, and I understand your perspective here. I just think that it's very important for us to be clear about this. Blair White doesn't deny that Blair White is a biological male. So it has to do with how the brain developed. It's a real thing. It's not a denial. And again, if they Blair White fully accepts who Blair White is. So Blair White doesn't need acceptance. It has to do with self-acceptance.
Sex person, so they still can get married. So that's him talking. So that's not me. But it is a really important point that this is excluding them altogether.
They act so childlike.
That clearly violates Title IX. It's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Sasha. Definitely echo everything that folks have said. I mean, I feel like this should be a priority for the LGBT movement, and it should be a priority in that it should be resourced, it should be supported, and I don't think we're seeing that as much as we should be. It also should be a priority for all movements who oppose the increased criminalization of communities, because we know that these laws that are about criminalizing people for providing trans care, for providing life-saving care, that ultimately they will most be used against Black and Brown communities. So this is really a issue that all movements should be prioritizing and taking up. And the other thing I'll add is that we also know, right, that this is a culmination, and it's definitely worse than we've seen before, of years of the conservative right using trans communities as a wedge. of using attacks against trans people as a way to build towards rolling back rights for so many different communities. So we know that this is part of at this point, multi-year strategic attack by the conservative right. And then the last thing that I'll say is that I think it's really important in this time of this onslaught of legislation, all of it targeting trans children and young people, that while I absolutely agree with Shannon that we need to be thinking about trans young people and children within a
Mount that like button for Sin,
kind of
guys.
holistic
Make sure you
space, right?
do.
Of like family, of community, of friends. And I also think what we need to see more of is the voices and leadership of trans young people themselves who.
Yeah, I want to make this point. I think this is a really good one. They're completely oblivious to the role that they've played in creating these problems. I think that this is a really important point. They really are completely oblivious to the role that they have played in creating these problems. If they didn't treat trans as a whole special class that should be held above every other class of people and treated differently, then they wouldn't be having as much trouble with acceptance. If they didn't say you can't make fun of trans people, or that only trans people should be able to play these roles, or that we have to be allowed to compete in your sports even if we biologically developed as men, they wouldn't be having these problems. This is I'm not gonna front and say that it's always been that it was easy for trans people before it became a thing. I think that it probably is not easy to be a trans person. I'm sure it's something that many, like, you take people like Buck Angel, who has, Buck Angel is like one of the most positive people on earth, but Buck Angel had a really hard time of it. Like there have been difficult experiences within the trans experience. It cannot be an easy thing to go through. It has to be incredibly traumatic, which is why therapy is so important. However, all of the activism, it only makes things worse. It doesn't help. It only makes things worse. I'm deeply sympathetic to trans people. I want them to be happy. I want them to be able to live however they want to live. I don't really care about any of it. But the minute that you start demanding special rights and special treatment is the minute you're going to turn a whole lot of people off. And that is exactly what they're doing.
Are also organizing, are fighting back against the legislation in their schools, in their states, and have been for some time. There are incredible trans youth leaders all across the country who have been organizing, who have been fighting back for many, many years. And particularly, I think, raising up and centering the voices of Black and brown trans young people who we know will bear the brunt of any of this legislation that passes. But we also know it matters if it passes or not, but that the harm that will be caused against trans young people is regardless of if it passes, right? The harm of hearing just ongoing anti-trans rhetoric and messaging in their states, in their cities, in their schools because of this legislation, we know that happens regardless of if this legislation passes. So one thing I just want to raise up is that TLC has a partnership with GSA Network, Gender Sexualities Alliance Network, which is a national queer and trans youth-led organization, for a project called Truth, which is a trans youth-led national organizing project. And that project has been working to bring together trans young youth leaders from the states facing anti-trans legislation to really raise up the voices, the needs, and the leadership of trans young people themselves, who we know are the ones who are most impacted by this legislation. So I think that it's really critical that we continue to center and raise up the voices and leadership of those most impacted by this legislation.
So we have a bunch of questions related to schools, both K-12 and higher education. I'll just throw them a bunch out there. Is there any hope to get the federal government to stop requiring colleges to submit their data as MNF and to recognize non-binary people. We're going to have some new guidance around Title IX on the K-12 and college level.
Why don't they want
and
that
to be
data
able to
recognized? I don't understand.
Give
Why don't they want that recognized?
students at Christian colleges some rights and not allow colleges to
Wait,
simply opt out of title.
Give students at Christian colleges rights? They have rights. They have the right to not attend a Christian college. No one compels you to go to college. No one forces you to go to a certain college, particularly not a Christian college, which most of the time are private, so it's not even the most economical college to go to. If you don't want to go to a Christian college, then go to a different college. This isn't even difficult. You don't need special rights at Christian goddamn colleges. Just don't go to a Christian college.
Title IX.
Jenny, before we answer that, can I just tell folks, I think people might be interested to hear this. I just got word that we just won in South Dakota. There will not be a sports bill in South Dakota this year.
Because of the Republican governor?
So we are winning some of them.
Because of the Republican governor?
But still, there have been anti-trans youth bills in South Dakota every year for 6 years now. And it's the same.
Because Kristi Noem's a rhino, but she's really pretty, so the Republicans accept her anyway because she's got nice tits.
And trans kids in that state
they're distracted easily.
That their
Let's just be
legislature,
honest.
their governor is against them.
No.
Even though we
Kristi Noem's the
barely
one
this
that
time,
killed it,
it's still a
dude.
big deal. But remember, we are still winning some of them, and that's really good, and it's helping us understand better how to beat all of them. Now, that being said, does anybody else want to start on the education?
Do you have any intel
About
the education from the secretary?
Yeah, the Title IX stuff. I actually don't know personally about the non-binary reporting in colleges and universities. I'm actually thinking maybe Jenny might know that as well as here. I don't know, but I don't know much about that. But so in around 2013 and
the Republicans do want to date her,
Melissa.
They do.
It's principals.
It's the only reason they like Kristi Noem is they want to date her.
Guidance.
Corey Lewandowski apparently is or did.
Trans folks or trans
she had a little affair with Corey Lewandowski.
That's what the Obama administration was responding to when they created the guidance, and it was guidance. It wasn't law. I mean, it's a little weightier than if I give you guidance, but it was just guidance, and it was about how schools can properly treat trans students so trans students can learn in a healthy environment, and so that the schools wouldn't be sued in violation of
She
Title
could do
IX,
so much better than
is,
Corey Lewandowski. That is correct.
Discrimination in school.
I don't know what
law,
the fuck she saw in Corey
and,
Lewandowski.
particularly around sex discrimination. The Trump administration took that guidance away in 2017, about 2 weeks after Attorney General Sessions came into office. It was one of his top priorities, and they took it away. I think we will see more guidance from the Biden administration, but really importantly, because of the Bostock decision and because 4 years have gone by, it's not as simple as just doing it like that. They need to work with some of our groups here to make sure they include everything. They need to work with parents and students and educators to get the guidance right. As impatient as I am about all this stuff, I understand that 2 months in isn't, we're not even out of the first 100 days yet. It very much fits in with the president's executive order on making sure that sex discrimination laws do protect us and having every agency do
It would
an
be
analysis
interesting
of
to
that.
see how they feel
So
about
I
Biden
think
now.
we will see it. I don't think I would want to posit a time frame for it.
And I'll jump in because I got to work on the Obama regs.
Oh, of
which
course
are
you did.
Guidelines. And we did work. We added stuff at the end, of course, to make sure everything was written out to give guidance with Secretary Lehman at the time of education. And we did want to tie it down because we didn't know what administration was coming in. And then when we did want to make sure that it was clear to give schools guidance. And so we try to wrap as much in it as possible. And so, but as Mara said, it was of course taken away during the last administration because they considered it law rather than guidance, and then schools began to opt out immediately because they couldn't opt out before. But I agree with Mara, it's too early in because changes would need to be made even to the Obama stuff now that we've warped
now that we've demanded more than we did when Obama was in office, things would have to be changed.
And that definitely the administration needs some time.
Convenient?
It's 100 days in, clearing up a few disasters, would we say, and trying to save the union. And
trying to save the union.
And
now we're going to war with Russia.
And hopefully get some information and
Joe
then,
Biden, the savior of the union, more COVID than ever, living with COVID, Afghanistan FUBAR, record inflation, war with Russia.
Administration without a problem.
But Joe Biden is saving the union.
And I just throw in, they're also, they're juggling a lot at the Department of Education, I think, because there was some really crappy rulemaking with regard to sexual violence.
They're juggling a lot in terms of making parents domestic terrorists.
Promulgated
Yes,
in the last administration that
they
they're
are.
going to be focusing on as well. But
it's deeply
but
traumatic.
Hopefully they'll, take some time.
I can't take these people seriously anymore. It's been 2 hours.
During the Obama administration, whatever
I feel
comes
like
out
I've
of the
had incredible
administration is likely to
restraint up
face a
until this
legal
point.
challenge. And it's just really important that they dot their I's and cross their T's and make sure that it's done right at this phase.
Yeah.
So we had a bunch of questions as well around healthcare access, gender affirming surgeries, what we can expect to see, particularly a question around the VA medical system allowing gender affirming surgeries and whether that's going to be happening anytime soon.
Does anybody actually know?
No one knows because they don't care about healthcare, because they care more about prison reform than healthcare.
I know before the last administration, the VA hospitals were working with trans people because I got shocked. I would get calls from them asking how to trans patients.
Oh, so you're saying the last administration was providing that?
And I'm sure
okay.
Mara has more to add, or Shannon, or somebody on this on the call as well.
Got it.
But I was getting calls for care and asking for
Got
guidance.
You're saying the last administration provided that?
That were taking care of trans patients.
Huh? Isn't that funny?
So
isn't that funny that the VA was providing that under
will
Trump?
Be likely, considering the trans ban has been lifted under this administration, and you heard Sasha. She's probably not that direction on your screen, but she is on mine. Say that what's happening, and I do believe they'll follow through with healthcare, given the two people that we have in office. I worked with President Biden. It's hard not to say Vice President, but President Biden. I've worked with him.
It is, because we all know who's really running the show, and that's Obama.
Seen, Vice President
Biden has
Harris's
dementia.
Work in California. And I know some people on this call have worked with her. And so I just think it's a no-brainer that we'll see that happen in this 4 years, if it can. And we have to look at the things he has to face, though, in reality, with, what's going on. And but, the VA hospitals were doing the work in many places. It was surprising, so.
Sasha, am I correct? You have a lawsuit against the VA, correct?
Yeah, well, actually, so the lawsuit was dismissed. So it's not active, but we're pretty confident that the current VA secretary will move forward in a positive direction. They've already signaled that they're going to be looking into.
But you just told me that the last VA was providing it,
which always sounds really weird to me. And they're going to review that, and they've sent it out in an email, I think, to the entire VA that's what they were reviewing at this point. So they haven't actually moved forward with any actual a policy change, but I know that Sparta and a number of other organizations are working hard on this to make sure it happens. So we likely won't be moving forward again with another legal challenge, hopefully. So I feel very confident that won't happen. I will say, with regard to the issue of healthcare generally, I think it is something that needs a lot more work. I feel like it's a little bit like trans people. There's a lot of animus directed towards trans care specifically, and a lot of misunderstanding about it and the medical necessity of it and the cost. Especially, this is the thing that drives me crazy, is that the cost is
Then
de minimis
maybe
anywhere it's been analyzed. And
you
that
should
includes the VA and the
focus
military.
on that.
It's always been less than 1/10 of 1%
instead
of
of
the
prison
budget for anybody
reform.
that's covered the care. But yeah, I'm confident that the government will move forward with it. There's a lot of states that continue to exclude it. And
wait, hang on.
There's work being done on that. But
Sin is making an excellent point. Side note, the VA does not supply dialysis for kidney patients. We have to go out of the system to get care. But what the disgruntled black lawyer was saying was that the VA was actually providing health care, and he was actually really surprised by that. Huh. Isn't that interesting?
but hopefully that'll move forward soon.
Healthcare for trans people, I should say, not for
We have
kidney
a
dialysis, which they don't care
trans
about.
youth on the call. Thank you very much for being here. Who asked what general advice you would have for young trans persons, especially where they don't have a lot of mentors, older trans people to have as role models.
And they have no advice.
Go ahead, Shannon. Shannon, you want to do it? Go ahead.
No, you go. I was just gonna tell you you're on mute. You go.
Oh, okay. Oh, because I love talking to youth. I was a college professor, and that's my favorite thing.
Oh,
My youth
God.
still follow me. So, and I refuse to let them be over 35. So you can grow over 35. You'll always be a youth. And I didn't have a mentor because I grew up in a rural place in a rural state. So I would encourage you to reach out, to any of us on this panel. And I never usually speak for people, but I know these people on this panel, and I know they all have a big heart, and they would be glad to mentor you, even though they're busier than hell. Pardon me, I wasn't supposed to use that, but including the host. But they would all be glad, including me, to mentor you. Okay? That's first. Secondly, there are groups that you can look for on Facebook, if you are. I don't know how old you are, that might be appropriate for you, that some of us can give you some guidance on. And I think that Jenny might be helpful with that, just suggesting, or some of us would be glad to help you with that. If you want that type of support. Depends on what level of support you would like. And then we could connect you with some friends that might be peers also that are your age, that would give you some peer support as well as adult support. Because I know one of the greatest things I ever did was go to a conference where I saw trans children, and I never had that opportunity, and it was the most beautiful thing in my life. And I cried my eyes out full of joy. And I want you to have that joy, to live your life as you want to, and with the support. And if you need help talking with your parents or doing that sort of thing, we can help provide you those resources through this call today. I know that. And anybody else here, jump in. This is not exclusive conversation. Mara or Shannon, I seen you, we have unmuted, and bless you, Mara. But you had unmuted, so please jump on in this conversation. And Jenny, please too, because all these people have big hearts on this call.
They all look dead inside.
we
They
are
all
more than
look dead in
glad.
their
I'm gonna
eyes.
let Jenny speak.
They
because
do.
I know Jenny can tell you how to connect.
They
with
look like
us.
pod people.
And yes, and so that we can connect and not mess up confidentiality or do anything like that or put you on the spot. Because we would definitely want you to feel connected and loved and taken care of in the right way and the proper way. Okay? And I am very happy that you're on this call. So thank you for speaking up and being present. And Jenny just sent their email address to you, so you can get a hold of any of us through Jenny. Okay? And anytime, anywhere, any day that you need some.
So these people are sending their private contact information. Listen, I want to say, mentorship is good. I believe in mentorship. I don't necessarily think it's inherently bad, but I'm a little concerned about the fact that these people are communicating with a minor who is a stranger on the internet, who does not know them from anything from Sunday, who may not have their parents' permission to be on this call or to be asking adults for their private contact information. That seems a little sketch to me, if I'm honest. Why are adults offering to communicate with they don't even know how old this person is. This person could be 17. This person could be 15. This person could be 12. They have no idea. That makes me extremely uncomfortable. It makes me extremely uncomfortable. And this is where we talked about like they behave very childlike. They be like this is very childlike behavior. It's not like you're making a new best friend. You are an adult and you have someone who is a minor on a webinar that you don't even know this person. You don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know if their parents even know what's going on. I wouldn't make any assumptions about grooming or pedos in the chat. That wouldn't be the assumption I would make, but it makes me feel a little sketch when grown adults who are being put in a leadership position are DMing their private contact information to a minor on the internet. Little sketch. Little sketch.
Support. We are all down for it. You see Mara's going yes, Shannon's nodding yes.
And no one thinks there's anything
Sasha
wrong with
and
this.
Chris, thank you guys very much.
Yes, we will
Although I
all
know I
talk to a
didn't need
minor on
thank
the
them for
internet
you,
without parental
okay?
permission.
And I'm
That's a
backing
little
up, Jenny.
sketch.
Go right on in.
I was just going to say, we recognize we're running out of time here. I do want to get to one last question that a bunch of people raised, and what can someone do, whether they're in a conservative state or in a blue state and want to help folks in conservative states that are battling these anti-trans bills? How can people best get involved and support the work for trans equality?
I can jump in quickly. So, you know, at this point, there are trans-led organizations all across the country. Like, I feel like any state you're in, any city, there is likely a trans-led organization, likely led by Black and brown trans people. So I would really encourage folks.
Why do you have to be Black or brown to lead a trans
Justice
organization?
Funding Project. One, they're amazing and you should know about them, and they're resourcing so many grassroots trans organizations, but also they have mapped out trans organizations all across the country. So you can go to their site, you can look for your state or your city or your region, and you will most likely find a number of trans organizations there who are in need of all the support they can possibly get. Donations.
Who is this woman that keeps? Oh, she's like the host.
So Trans Justice Funding Project, I'll drop it in the chat.
Other folks?
I mean, this is
this person literally laughs every time they talk.
A lot of the anti-trans and other negative bills that we're seeing as a result of gerrymandering. So, you know,
no.
To whatever extent people are able
that is
to get involved,
extremely wrong
with
point.
Political work, but also most importantly to vote.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, thanks, Kyler. Yeah, if I could also add, remember the whole breadth of things we've talked about here today, like ending immigration detention for trans people and fighting these bad bills in the states and passing the Equality Act and working to end mass incarceration. There's a lot of different things you can all be working on, and you ought to work on the one that's important to you. You'll be a lot better at it. You'll be a lot happier doing it. You'll build yourself up more. You'll build up your community more. So look for the one that really matters to you.
And I would agree with Mara. Pick something that you're comfortable, that's in your lane. You know, I tell people to start local, like Chris does. You know, start local. There's always something local that you can do. But, you know, if you haven't even met a trans person, I always tell people to start there. I just did a webinar right before this as a diversity training. And some people haven't started
What qualifies
there,
that person
but,
for
you know,
diversity training? Nothing?
but then definitely supporting. How can you get active with legislation? You know, right? Your
Jesus
local
Christ.
state people, your city council people, if there's something on the local level, your state representative, your state Senate person, your national people on the national level. You can call them, you know, letters work as well, emails as well. Continuing to bother them, build a relationship with them is what you really should do. Building a relationship.
Well, this is actually good advice in general, not specific for this stuff. This, like, he's actually giving good advice in general.
In their office.
Diversity is a bingo word.
People in their office are really the influencers to them. Get that sort of relationship going with your elected officials. We need you to do that. And if that's not your game, then donate money to some of these local nonprofits that are doing the work on the ground, or nationals, you know, but whatever is in your lane. And then there are all these issues that we're hitting that Mara's named and that Sasha's named and actually Chris' name. You know, we have to reach outside. This community looks at only like one hit, and actually Americans do. This is my issue. My issue impacts so many things like redistricting, voting rights, you know, all of those things impact us. And unless we connect to those and bring other people to this table, we can't move anything. And Chris Hayashi said that earlier, and I'm saying that again. So yes, that's how we get Black people on. That's how we get Asian on board. That's how we get other people on board. Because if we're not fighting for their rights, they're not going to come over here and fight for us. And that's how we build coalition. So we got to do those things. And if you're part of that coalition and you're Black and they're talking about trans people, then you say, hey, don't do that. Why are you being transphobic? Challenge those thoughts. Do not allow that, because then that's how Black trans women get killed. Because then you're sitting there talking smack with them, and you don't believe that. Don't talk smack with them. Stop the smack.
Like, okay,
when I'm in the barbershop.
I just want to point out that this guy actually started giving good advice. He really did. He started out giving good advice, being like, write your state legislators, form a relationship with people in their office. And then he's such a fucking victim that he went from giving really good advice, just generally speaking, to, if you don't do this, you're going to get Black trans women killed. Sin asks, one, on the victim hierarchy, are trans higher than Blacks? So you have to look at like the intersectionality victim hierarchy, right? Because there's like the race one, and then there's all the other identities. So are trans people higher than Blacks? It depends on who you ask, but if you have a Black trans person, they trump everything. If you bring intersectionality into the equation and you have trans anything, that will trump all other identities by like a long shot. So maybe they probably are, but it really depends on who you ask.
The smack stats. I'm like, hey, what are you talking about? No, don't talk that way. Why? Then I tell them why. So do that. Challenge the assumptions. Be big. Own yourself.
Stunning and brave.
I think
Stunning and brave.
We're out of time, but I wish we could all give you all a standing ovation and you could all hear us. So we just all have to privately do that in the privacy of our own homes.
Spirit
what a
fingers.
Special and fantastic panel. I know everyone, based on the texts and emails I was seeing popping up, I really appreciated it. So I just want to let attendees know that you'll all receive links to the entries or the articles that were written by our panelists in the encyclopedia.
That seems to be it. That's all we have for today. What did you guys think of that presentation? That was a lot, if I'm honest. It was a lot. It was a lot of activists. And it's like the energy of those presentations for me is like even worse than the critical race theory ones. To be honest, it's like, so we were talking about how like are trans higher than Black people on the oppression hierarchy? Yeah, kind of. But their energy is also lower. It's like they do perceive themselves, I really do believe, to be much more victims than Black people, than even like the CRT activists. Because I don't think that most Black people actually perceive themselves to be victims. Like the average Black person does not perceive themselves to be a victim of a society. The average, well, maybe not the average, Definitely the average trans activist. Not the average trans person. I should be very specific with my language. The average trans activist absolutely perceives themselves to be a victim of the world. That was a lot. I can't do, like, I don't like doing the trans stuff. It doesn't make me feel good. I feel like their energy is just so low that it's just like, it hurts. It really does. But guys, that is our happy hour for this week. Now, as a reminder, if you appreciate the work I'm doing in researching this stuff and providing different resources for you guys and talking about it and putting these happy hours together and researching the training, all that stuff, the very best thing you can do is become a supporter in my locals community. My locals make it possible for me to do the work I do. I am very appreciative for all of my locals members because I really would have to go and do more real work in my like organizational psychology practice if I didn't have my locals community. But you guys make it possible for me to spend time doing this. And it's actually kind of funny. I do actually have to analyze the results of an employee engagement survey this weekend. But when I'm not analyzing the results of employee engagement surveys and disc surveys and things like that, that's when I can do stuff with you. And my locals community makes that possible. You can become a member of my locals for $5 a month. You can become a member for $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. You can also make a one-time gift. You can head over to kb.locals.com/support. And when you join my locals, you get access to things like our 2 Zoom calls every single week. Our next Zoom call is on Monday at 7 p.m. We do book club. We do craft and bitch. We do all sorts of stuff together. We also have a super secret project launching this weekend that I'm really excited about. Speaking of this weekend, just a reminder that instead of effed up news on my main channel this weekend, we are going to be having a very special Sunday stream in which my Ukrainian husband, Victor, is going to be making his first ever appearance on my stream. And he is going to answer your questions about Ukraine and Russia from his perspective of having been born in the Ukraine, growing up in the Ukraine, living there until he's 21. All of his family are still over there. His brother is very excited about going to fight the Russians and fuck them all up. So we're going to be having a conversation with Victor for the first time ever on Sunday. I'm really excited about this. I think you guys are really going to like it. You're really going to like meeting Victor. You're going to like hearing what he has to say. Now, that is going to be on my main channel. If you're watching on Odyssey or Rockfan or Rumble, that you don't have to change anything. But on YouTube, this is going to be on my main channel on Sunday at 5 p.m. That's all I got for right now, guys. Take care. Have a great rest of your Friday, and we'll see you soon.